There are a lot of drugs in this world. Now, I personally am not one that really uses them too much, but there are a lot of them out there, and a lot of people use them. There's a lot of the common ones, like weed, for example, is a really common drug that's used in America. But today, what we're going to be talking about is not those more common ones, but rather more of those outlandish ones from each continent that I found that I personally think are either the craziest or the weirdest or the deadliest one that I could find. Some of these, they aren't exactly the most deadly. You one taste and it'll kill you, but rather it's a little bit more weird in a sense that it'll send you to another dimension almost. Kind of weird. So today we're going to be talking about that, ranking them from each continent. Obviously, we're not going to include one continent, that being Antarctica, because don't really think there are any drugs there worth mentioning. Maybe they are. I don't know. Maybe they are. But as far as I know, there's not many people living there, so there's not going to be many drugs there. So yeah, so that's going to be that. So without further ado, let's get into it. We don't like to waste time here. So yeah. The first drug I'm going to be talking about is called the Devil's Breath. Now, this drug is typically found and used in South America, but because of its unique properties, it's been found worldwide increasingly. The main use of this drug is basically to mind control you. One, it causes amnesia, so you don't remember what happened to you while you were drugged, but two, it makes you very compliant while you're drugged. So oftentimes, maybe you're asked to hand over your information, like, I don't know, your credit card information or your crypto information. Typically, you would be like, I'm not gonna give that to you. But under this drug, you might be more like, you know what, sure man, I would love to do that. I know my acting isn't the best, but you get the point. And so this drug is typically used on foreigners or unsuspecting tourists because it's very easy to do so. This is thanks to the two forms that it comes in. One being the liquid that is tasteless, so you can just pour it into someone's drink, they'll never find out. Two, there is a odorless powder version, so you could walk up to someone, blow it in their face, and yeah, they're done for basically. There are also minor side effects of this drug, but honestly, compared to the main effects of it, I don't think anybody really cares. I mean, it can give you a fever, it can also give you a headache, and then obviously at very high dosages, it can kill you. Apparently also in very low dosages, it's used to treat nausea, but considering the other effects of this drug, I don't know if I really want to take it anymore. But yeah, overall, I think I would give this drug a A tier, just because of its very unique effects, and honestly, it seems like it's out of a fiction book. The ability to just control people, it just doesn't seem real. But yeah, that's what it's used for, so moving on. Next drug I'm going to be talking about is called ibogaine. I honestly should have let off with this one just because of how crazy the effects are, but essentially just sends you into a dreamlike trance for about 24 to 72 hours. I was going through Reddit about people's experiences. There's a whole Reddit subreddit that, you can go through if you want to, labeled r/ibogaine, in which people talk about their experiences and whether or not they want to take it. But some people say, they talk to God. Some people say that they saw their entire life flash before them. Some people just have really weird dreams, like they're just fighting dragons. So the experience that you get really does depend from person to person. But this drug definitely has more positives than the previous one did, because it's oftentimes used in order to treat addictions or PTSD, things that people are going through and struggling with. This drug typically is used as a treatment for those things. So sometimes people fly out to places like Mexico and have a treatment done for them. Where we really start to see the negatives of this drug is when people try to do these treatments on their own. There have been cases, for example, such as a heroin addict who was found dead in a rented apartment after ingesting what seems to be ibogaine. Their autopsy did show that he did die of pulmonary edema. This was likely due to secondary complications of heart failure, which may have been caused by the ibogaine. So there's definitely some misuse due to its increasing popularity online. So, I would say make sure you really know what you're doing if you're ever thinking about getting into it. I'm obviously not here to give any medical advice, but there's, whole subreddits, like I said, where you can look into it. But yeah, honestly, I think I would give this one an S tier just because of its crazy hallucination and dreamlike trance. I don't know if I personally would ever want to try it. It sounds interesting, but yeah, I don't know. But I'm going to give it an S tier. Now, the next one we're going to be talking about is called desomorphine, otherwise known as crocodile. It's a Russian word, so I might be pronouncing that wrong because I'm not Russian. But this is probably one of the first ones in which there's a lot more negative physical, bodily damage rather than mental damage, because up until now we've been really mainly talking about ones that have crazy mind effects. But this one is the first one where it's just straight up, destroys your body. It was called crocodile actually because of the effects that it would sometimes leave on the people using it, in which case your skin would rot away and it would kind of look like this green scaly flesh, which is, like a crocodile, because crocodiles have green, scaly flesh, I guess. Originally developed as a painkiller, but people in Russia began using their own homemade mixtures in which they would take codeine and then they'll mix it with things like gasoline or iodine and then inject that straight into their veins. Now this would give them a short high in which they probably felt amazing, but that would immediately be followed with the come down of realizing that your blood vessels have been ruptured and an infection is currently spreading throughout your body. We'd see a lot of cases in which people's, arms, hands, legs, everywhere would be falling apart because it would essentially just rot away your body. At its peak within Russia, hospitals oftentimes saw people with their hands and arms completely rotting away to the point where they needed to just straight up amputate it. Sometimes the infection would get so bad that it would come up to their jaw and their jaw was just hanging off because it would essentially just eat away your flesh and all you're left with is just the bone underneath. So pretty disgusting stuff. I don't know if I want to be able to put a photo up here just because, people might not like that. And also, I feel like YouTube might not like that. But you get the point. It's pretty disgusting. I'm going to have to rate this an F tier. Shocker. I don't think there is really any positives to gain from it. It's pretty bad for you. So, yeah, F tier. Now the next one I'm going to be talking about is called Yaba, which translates to crazy drug or mad drug. And it originates from Asia, in which we find basically just methamphetamine and caffeine mixed together. There's actually a little bit of an interesting backstory to this drug, in which there's a nickname for it, which is called the Nazi speed, because supposedly Nazi soldiers would take this and, well, they'd be immensely high off of it, and they would, use it during war. Now typically the pills are usually just swallowed, the mixture. Sometimes people will heat it up and inhale the vapor, otherwise known as chasing the dragon. But yeah, it's a pretty basic mixture to be honest, but I just kind of found it was a little bit cool just because of the history fact behind it. And apparently this drug was also important to things like the Blitzkrieg strategies in which, the Nazi soldiers would go in really quickly. They were probably most likely high off of this mixture of methamphetamine and caffeine, which honestly it probably works considering caffeine is, a lot of people take it as a modern day stimulant and methamphetamine probably only adds to that effect. So this drug supposedly allowed the soldiers to go multiple days without sleeping or feeling tired, which is probably a pretty big advantage, especially when you're a war of attrition and, opponents are getting tired and all of your soldiers are just hyped up junkies on straight methamphetamine and caffeine. Now there are some short-term effects for it. Obviously there's increased heart rate. Sometimes you can go into stroke, which, you don't want to do that, but I guess in war times it doesn't really matter. Psychologically, if it's used too often, it can lead to things like paranoia and severe confusion. But again, I don't really think they were too worried about that in the war. In Thailand, supposedly, this drug accounts for about 80% of their smuggled drugs. So pretty popular to this day still. But yeah, I'm gonna put this honestly at like an A tier. And I feel like it's not as bad as some of the other ones on this list, but it's also not as cool as some of the other ones on this list. So yeah, I'm just gonna put it at an A tier. Now next up for Oceania, I couldn't really find any like super crazy drug from there. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, obviously this is a good thing. But mostly I could find was like super high concentrated like nicotine or kava, which is like an alcoholic drink there. But while I was researching, I did find this tree called the suicide tree, which has a seed that if you take it, you can die within a few hours. So I figured I might as well just cover that instead. So we have the Cerevera odolum, otherwise known as the suicide tree, because the seed can kill you within hours if you take it. Or eat it, I guess. Now this works by directly targeting your heart. It can cause things like arrhythmias or slowing of your heart, and then it eventually can cause cardiac arrest and then kill you by directly targeting your heart cells and disrupts them, as well as disrupting your ion balance, which disrupts your heart's electrical signals, which is pretty important to keep it running. Go from, a light nausea within the first few hours, and then by hour 6 we see life-threatening arrhythmias or cardiac arrests, which, can kill you. If you go to the hospital for this, there's about a 70 to 80% chance that you'll survive. Unfortunately, that still leaves about 20 to 30% chance that you'll die, even if you go to the hospital, which, isn't that great. Yeah, I'm gonna put this one in like C tier, because, it doesn't really classify as a drug, but it was the closest thing that I could find and the weirdest thing that I could find. So yeah, again, I could be wrong, put it down in the comment section, I guess, if there's something else that you guys know about. But for my research, I couldn't really find anything crazy. So yeah. Next drug that we're going to be talking about is called datura. This is a substance that can be found in plants like the devil's trumpet, and I feel like that's kind of a dead giveaway that you probably shouldn't be taking it. But it contains substances like atropine and scopolamine, which are both things that directly affect with your nervous system. And this is kind of a psychedelic, except unlike normal or Okay, I say normal, but none of them are really normal. Unlike more tame psychedelics in which you are aware you're on a trip, this is a true delirium, which means that you're unable to tell that you're in a trip or not. So it ends up leading you to doing things like talking to imaginary people that aren't actually there, or being able to see scenes that feel 100% real but are definitely not. And so typically, you know, it starts off with a little bit of dry mouth and maybe a little confusion, but then you start to get a lot of delirium and some terrifying hallucinations. As for your body, you can experience things like dangerously high heart rates, seizures, and sometimes even comas if it goes bad. Lastly, these can last about 24 to 48 hours, so, you know, don't expect it to go away anytime soon. There are some incidences of this. One of them actually is in the US, in which a group of teenagers took it because they thought it'd be, you know, a fun little trip. Turns out, not really. They all got sent to the hospital. They were found. One of them was found a few miles away from his house, still talking to people that didn't exist. One of them was found trying to remove objects from his body. So yeah, definitely a little bit delirious. And they were all sent to the hospital and they were diagnosed with this thing. It's a big scientific word. Severe anticholinergic toxicity. I could have butchered that completely, but I have it up on the screen probably so you guys can tell it. But yeah, that's what they got. Doesn't sound good, probably isn't. But yeah, again, this is another just trippy one. I'm also probably gonna put this into an S tier just because of its immense psychedelic effects on your body. Again, I probably won't be trying this anytime soon if I'm gonna be honest, guys. But yeah, that's gonna be about it for this video. Like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed it. And that's about it until I see you guys in the next one. So